This segment will be a burn-in demonstration. One of the tips that I might give is on the stand for the burn-in knife. If you put a piece of tape down, that will keep it from sliding around on you. And this is how it sets in the stand. We don't want to set it like this because then the stand would heat up and could possibly damage a surface. So we'll just lay the knife in there while it's heating up. Now, before I use a knife, I always like to clean it. And I clean it each and every time I use it. I want to lay this flat on the surface and just give it a little bit of a clean. That way we get all the old material off and we make sure that we have a clean surface on the tool. I always look at the end of it there to make sure that I'm cleaning all the way across. And then the last thing I do is dub the blade at about a 15 to 30 degree angle. That way the edge is not sharp and won't damage the surface. Burn-in sticks are quite a bit different than a wax fill stick. The burn-in stick material is much tougher. Has some of the same similar resins that a hot melt glue might have. So we do have great adhesion with it. The nice thing about this is it won't dent. And you really be difficult to dig it back out, where a fill stick is pretty soft. So we're going to use this method in areas from the countertop up to that area we can comfortably reach, areas that are going to get more scrutiny. It takes a few minutes for the knife to heat up. We're just about there. On the back of a piece of sandpaper, I can take and melt some of the material. And this particular color is a little bit dark, so I'm going to add just a little bit of this lighter material in and intermix the colors. And I'll just heat that up, mix it thoroughly till I get the one color. And then I'm going to pick the sandpaper up and get the material back on my knife blade. I'll go right back on the blade. My defect, I made sure that I didn't have any splinters sticking up. And I'm just going to take and dip that into the defect and let that material come off the knife and fill the defect up. Get a little more off my sandpaper here. Don't like to waste any material. Put that back on the knife, and then we're going to transfer it right to the defect. Again, I use the tip of the knife to kind of drag it around and make sure that I fill the whole part of the defect and that I don't have any bubbles in the defect. I can wet my finger and press on that, and it's already started to harden. We do have to have a rag handy. We always wipe our knife blade off every chance we get. So besides the burn-in knife and a burn-in stick and a rag, we also need the burn-in lubricant. Once we fill the hole, we're going to apply this material around the defect. This lubricant is going to do a couple of things for us. It will protect the surface from the heat of the knife, and it'll also allow us to pick up that excess material rather than just chase it around the surface. So like an airplane coming in for a touch and go landing, I just touch the surface, add a little bit of pressure, and as I go across, I can level that repair. While the lube is still on there, I can take my finger and check it for level. I need to level that just a little bit more. Check it again. That's much more level. If I feel like I need to sand it, I can take some of the 400 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand that with the lubricant on there. A couple of passes should do it. Feels perfectly level. I can now clean off the lube. Now the lube is a special formula that does not interfere with adhesion. If I top coat this, I'll still get good adhesion. So once we have that done, we can come back, add some grain lines in. We can use our brush tip graining pen. We can use an art brush with some powder and solvent, the brush graining liquid, and color that in, and then we could top coat this. When we top coat it, we put on light misting coats. We never like to use heavy wet coats. So that's a basic burn in. A little bit of practice, we can get pretty good at it. This segment is to introduce our powder putty. It's going to come to you in a jar in a powder form, and we just add water, mix to the desired consistency, and it's available in walnut, mahogany, pine, beech, alder, oak, and then also for prime surfaces, white. Again, comes to you as a powder, and I've already had some mixed up here, but basically what you do is you just take the powder, put in a jar, put in a container of your choice, I guess. We're going to mix that with water. Nice thing about this putty is it can be reconstituted. If you have some putty that maybe the lid was left off the jar and it's dried up, just add a little bit of water to it and let it set overnight, and it should be able to be stirred back up. So I always like to keep dry powder aside from when I mix, just in case I get it a little too runny. Add a little too much water, I can always come back and add just a little bit more powder to thicken it back up and get it to the right consistency. Basically, we have a defect on the panel here, and it's real simple. We use it just like we would any wood filler. Apply the putty, allow it to dry. Should be dry in about 8 to 10 minutes. Temperature and air movement will determine how fast it will dry. Once it's dry, it sands very easy, powders up very easily. It does accept stain, but it may not accept it like the surrounding wood. As I often say, two pieces of wood don't accept stain the same way, so sometimes we have to touch up the areas that we puttied. So, if the putty dries out, just add water to it. Freezing of this putty doesn't hurt it. Just add a little bit of water, mix it back up. This will be a short video to demonstrate the dye-based toners, aerosol toners. It's very important to agitate the can thoroughly for several minutes to make sure that we have the true color coming out of the nozzle. So we just want to make sure we shake it well. I'm going to cover up a corner of the block. Now I'm going to apply the dye toner in light misting coats. Just a couple of light misting coats, and we can see a dramatic change in the color of the panel. Now this is over an existing finish. The color that we add is just laying on the surface. It takes it a few minutes to dry. Should be dry to the touch. I would want to top coat this with a clear top coat to protect that additional color that we put on the surface. Now that color, like I said, is just on the surface. This is 400 grit sandpaper, and I can come in and feather that edge. And you can feather that edge in before you seal it with the clear. Another trick that we use, sometimes we don't need the full pattern of spray that comes out of the aerosol. So in that case, if I just need a small area, I'll actually just hold the shield up and lightly dust that, and we can get a very small spot of color. We don't want to lay it on the surface because then we would get a stenciling effect and a hard line. But if we want to just limit the number of passes, we want to sneak up on an area, we can use a smaller guide or shield to achieve that. Again, this color is going to dry very rapidly. We can come back then and feather that in if we need to. This video will demonstrate the pigmented toners. Pigmented toners are a little cloudier, less opaque, or excuse me, more opaque than the dye aerosols. The dye toners are more translucent and we can see clearly the grain patterns below. I'll demonstrate the application of the pigmented toner, and it's a little muddier, a little more opaque in its color application. Again, we want to shake that aerosol thoroughly, shake it for a couple of minutes, and then when we apply it, we want to use dry misting coats. It's much better to do multiple coats lightly than to try to put on a heavy wet coat. When we apply a heavy wet coat, oftentimes that color will float and move around on us. Again, if I need to feather this, I can always come back in and sand that edge to feather it in. The material does dry pretty rapidly and pretty easy to use. Again, as we showed in the dye toner video, we can use a shield, and that allows us to hit a very small spot. Just hold that shield up off the surface. We don't want to lay it on the surface and get a stencil effect. So that's one way we can limit the size of the area that the material is being applied to. It is important to top coat this with a clear coat, as the material, the dye toner and the pigmented toners are just setting on the surface and could wear off over a period of time. So we want to put a clear coat over it. That's it.